I believe in a God who works within the story of life. God doesn't just co-opt your story when you give your life to Him. Doesn't turn your story into a religious story. God makes your life story more meaningful as you become involved with God. That's certainly what I found. I gave my life to Christ the summer before I started high school. And that fall, I found God at work in my studies, in my interactions with my fellow students and my teachers, in my extracurricular activities, and in everything that I did. But I want to tell you one story in particular that illustrates this. I had already, by this point in my life, wanted very much to grow up and be a novelist. So in the 9th grade, I had an English lit course that I found fascinating because everything we read, I was learning from the masters. But I didn't just do the homework and listen to what the teacher had to say. I discussed it with God. So every day after school, I'd talk with God and say, you know, what's your take on this, Lord? Or how do you think I could use this or that technique in my writing? And I'd discuss it with God. I remember one assignment in particular. We were supposed to read the story, The Lady or the Tiger, by Frank Stockton. It was the story of a young prince who was put into a amphitheater, and he was placed before two doors. One door had a lady behind it, and the other had a tiger. If he opened the door with the lady, then he would marry her. If he opened the door where the tiger was, then he would be killed. The king had placed him in this amphitheater because he was angry at him. He was secretly having a relationship with the king's daughter, and the king did not approve. The king's daughter was sitting beside him in the audience. She knew which door was which. So the young man looked to her pleadingly, and she gave him a signal. He turned around, went to one of the doors, and opened it. And this is where the story ends. The author says, which door did he choose? The lady or the tiger? It was a very powerful story precisely because it didn't answer the question. Our assignment was to ruin it by writing an ending. So I discussed it with God, and I said, Lord, I don't know how we could write anything that's going to have the same impact or carry forward the same kind of power that the story already has. For example, Lord, I know that a lot of people, probably guys, are going to say that he goes to the door with the tiger, and the tiger is going to come out and tear him to shreds. But what's interesting about that? A lot of other people, mostly girls, are going to say that he went to the door where the woman is, and he is going to be married, and it's going to be all flowers and happiness. But there's a lot more going on in this story. The drama of it is that the woman loves him. As the author said, the king's daughter loves him. So on the one hand, she doesn't want to see him killed. On the other hand, she also doesn't want to see him marry somebody else. So what do we do here, God? How do we continue on the drama of what's happening in this story? So, like I said, I prayed about it. And then I had a couple of ideas, and I placed them before God. I said, okay, Lord, here's one idea I have. That the woman loves him, and it really is ripping her heart out in order to do it. But she directs him to the door where the lady is, because she doesn't want to see him get killed. Unfortunately, the young man doesn't trust her. So he chooses the other door, and he's killed by the tiger. Now that, it seems to me, is an interesting ending, but it's already lost some of the power. The whole power of it is kind of an aftermath. It's kind of a post-mortem explanation. Oh, there was this tragic mistake. So that's certainly a more interesting ending than the obvious ones, but I still think it's anticlimactic, don't you? So Lord, the other idea I have is that the king's daughter tries to direct him to the tiger because she can't bear to see him marry somebody else. But the young man is wise to her. So he goes to the other door and he chooses the lady, and they get married. But then they have to go on the run because then the king's daughter tries to kill them because she can't stand to see them married happily and so on. That would be a much longer story. It would also change the genre. It would turn it into an action adventure. And that's really not what's powerful about this story. So you see my dilemma, Lord? I want to write an ending that is as powerful as the story itself. But I can't think of how to do that. Can you give me an idea? I waited a moment, and then an idea did come to me. That was better than the others I had. And the more I thought about it, the more excited I got. I started to write it down. And as I started to write, the possibilities within it became even more evident to me. Play on words again and again throughout the thing. And by the time I was done, I said, "This is perfect, Lord. Thank you." The next day, we all turned in our papers, and the teacher spent the hour reading everybody's papers. It was really rather boring. She would read a paper, and it would be about he opened up a door, and the tiger came out and tore him to shreds, all kinds of blood and gore. And then there would be a paper about a wedding, all kinds of pageantry, the flowers, everything described in great detail. It was just one story after another about either the lady or the tiger. There was another story that started out a lot like the rest of them. The young man went to the door where the lady was, and they were married. Started out just like the others. But then it started to change when they got home. And at this point, the teacher, she was reading along in kind of a monotone like she had read all the others, and then she stopped. And her eyes narrowed. And she read with more interest. Because in this story, this was no blushing bride. She had loved another man. And she resented deeply the fact that she had been forced by the king to marry this young man instead. She told him right up front that she did not love him, that she would not love him ever. There was nothing he could do to be anywhere near as great as the man she had loved, a man she would never have. This then became their life together. The young man did everything he could to try to please her. His whole life from that point on became just trying to please her. But the claws had come out. And she ripped his heart apart, not once, but day after day for the rest of his life. All she ever did was lay out in the sun and preen herself, and the love he gave her, she never returned. And so I ask you, which door did he choose? The lady or the tiger. The teacher, once she finished, she just kept looking at the paper, and her eyes darted back and forth as she reread the ending. And very quietly she whispered, "Wow." My friends told me that there was no mystery at all about who had written the paper because my face turned a deep, dark red almost from the beginning. When I got the paper back from the teacher, she had written in the margin of it, "How did you ever think of this?" I wasn't yet at the point in my faith journey where I felt comfortable going and telling her. But very soon after that, I started telling everybody. This is what God has done in my life, again and again. God has come into the story of my life, invites me to pray about the things going on in my life, and then gives me answers. Answers just like that one. Have you found God in the story of your life? If you haven't, you're missing something. I invite you to pray about your life. Pray about the story of your life. Just the dumb stuff, just the nitty-gritty stuff that's going on in your life. And watch what happens when God gets involved in the story of your life.